In early 1942, the United States found itself embroiled in World War II, having suffered a sneak attack by the Japanese Empire at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. The Pacific Fleet had been decimated. America's west coast was threatened with invasion. Public confidence had been shaken. At the same time, a very special group of Army Air Corps aviators, supported by a task force of United States Navy ships, prepared for a most daring response. They were highly trained, exceptionally motivated, and brilliantly led. Their success would become legend in military aviation history. After their mission, they would forever be known as Doolittle's Raiders. An out-of-the-box thinking submariner named Captain Francis Lowe answered the President's call with a bold and most ingenious idea. He proposed launching medium-range bombers off a carrier striking at the heart of Japan's mainland. Captain Lowe was Assistant Chief of Staff for Anti-Submarine Warfare and reported to Admiral Ernest King. Captain Lowe had come up with the concept when he observed medium-range bombers taking off from a naval airfield in Norfolk, Virginia. The airfield's runway had been painted with the outline of a carrier deck for practice. The plan was not without risk. This concept had never been done before. A medium-range bomber normally needed 1,500 feet to take off. It would now have to take off in less than 500 feet, fully loaded with fuel and 4 500-pound bombs. The Mitchell B-25 was selected as the bomber of choice. It was small enough to fit on an aircraft carrier and capable of striking at a longer range. Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle was known to those around him as the boss, or the old man, because of his being 45 years old at the time. Doolittle was tasked in developing and executing the plan. His knowledge of aircraft development and his PhD in aeronautics became invaluable in executing the strategy. Captain Lowe's idea took flight on February 2, 1942, off the coast of Virginia. 2 test pilots would use Doolittle's calculations to get the bombers in the air from the Navy's newest carrier, the USS Hornet, which had been commissioned in October 1941.
Twice before the mission, a B-25 had been taken off the Hornet to prove that it was possible. However, these 2 were taken off with a light load.
The all-volunteer crews were sent to Eglin Field in Florida, where they trained for the mission. They were told this highly secret mission called for short takeoffs, but they had no idea what or where the mission would take them. As training proceeded, so did the modifications to their B-25s. Already, the lower gun turret and radios were removed to reduce weight. Rubber gas tanks were added to the wings, as well as the lower gun turret area. Wooden broomsticks were placed as tail guns in an attempt to keep enemy fighters back. The engines were adjusted to run lean in order to save fuel. On April 2, 1942, from the port of San Francisco, the Hornet set out to sea with 16 B-25s strapped to her flight deck, along with 80 crew members still unaware of the mission in which they volunteered.
Each airplane had 5 people, so there were 80 of us.
After 24 hours out at sea, the Army Air Corps crews of the B-25s would learn of their mission and their intended targets. The mission called for the B-25s to set a course for Japan and the city of Tokyo, along with 4 other Japanese cities, in order to bomb military and industrial centers.
We each had 4 bombs, each one weighing 500 pounds. Depending upon the target, it was 4 demolition bombs, 4 incendiary bombs, or 2 of each.
They were to launch 450 miles from the Japanese coast. This would be beyond the range that Japan would expect, so they would not be looking for such a bold endeavor. Once making landfall over Japan, The B-25s were to go to their assigned target, drop their bombs, and head to China, where they were to land at a predetermined airfield. On April 10, 1942, the Hornet met up with the carrier Enterprise and Admiral William Halsey, along with Halsey's task force. The plan was for the raid to be carried out at night and then land safely in China at dawn. However, on the morning of April 18th, 9 hours before the planned launch, the task force was discovered by Japanese picket vessels. Although the Japanese ships were sunk, the odds were good the task force's presence was no longer a secret. The Hornet and its 16 B-25s was over 800 miles out, which was 400 miles further than planned. A decision had to be made. Either commence the launch immediately or abort the mission. After careful consideration between Doolittle and Admiral Halsey, the mission was a go. On that morning, the weather was bad. The Hornet pitched in the heavy seas as she turned into the wind. The pilots had to time their launch so the bow of the ship was going up when they reached the end of the flight deck. Lieutenant Colonel Doolittle led the way in his B-25 as it soared into the air from the pitching deck. Knowing that fuel was critical, each plane headed directly to their targets.
We came in hugging the deck. We didn't know whether they had radar or not.
9 of the 16 B-25s, including Doolittle's, headed toward Tokyo. The rest of the bombers were assigned targets in Yokohama, Nagoya, Osaka, and Kobe. They arrived at their targets at midday. Coincidentally, the Japanese had practiced an air raid drill that morning. When the people saw the bombers overhead, they thought it was all part of the drill. They soon realized that was not the case. Upon reaching the Japanese shore, some of the bombers were engaged by fighters.
We all went in on the deck and then pulled up to 1,500 feet to bomb. We felt that was about as low as we dared bomb without some danger from our own bomb fragments.
After releasing their bombs, the B-25s dropped down low, following the terrain to China. They were to follow Beacon.
They had prepared a field. There was supposed to be a beacon for us to home in on. We unfortunately didn't have that because the airplane flying the beacon in crashed. All aboard were killed, and when we began to plaintively call, turn on the beacon, there was no beacon. So then we were on our own.
At the time of the raid, most of China's coast was covered with Japanese soldiers. The B-25s were low on fuel, but fortunately, the flight from Japan to China came with a favorable 20 to 30 mile-per-hour tailwind. Without a beacon to guide them, the mountains of China made finding a suitable landing area almost impossible.
2 landed in the ocean when they got to the shore, just about out of gasoline. 1 flew inland and landed in an inland lake.
With their fuel tanks empty, many were forced to abandon their aircraft and bail out.
The others all took to the parachutes.
2 men died in attempting to ditch their aircraft along the coast of China. Another man died when his parachute failed to open. One of the B-25s diverted to the Soviet Union.
1 airplane, because of a fuel shortage, went to Russia against orders. It was his only salvation. And we had asked the Russians for permission to come there, and they had refused. That airplane, by the way, is still in Russia.
The B-25 was confiscated, and the crew was interned for a year before escaping through what is now Iran with the assistance of the British government. 8 crew members were captured by the Japanese. The Japanese held a mock trial.
3 were executed by the Japanese. 1 died of beriberi malnutrition while in Japanese prison.
Aided by the Chinese, the remaining 64 crew members made it to the rally point. The Chinese civilians who assisted the Americans paid a heavy price, as the Japanese killed an estimated 25,000 during their search for Doolittle and his men. For Doolittle, he believed losing 16 aircraft and causing only minor damage on the targets meant mission was a failure. He told his crew that he fully expected to be court-martialed upon his return to the United States. Contrary to his belief,
it gave the American people the first piece of good news that they had had. And as a morale builder, it was very effective.
As they felt Doolittle and his raiders had avenged the attack on Pearl Harbor by bombing Tokyo. It also had a psychological effect on the Japanese public as well.
It caused the Japanese to question their warlords, who had told them that Japan would never be attacked.
By bombing their homeland, it cast doubt on Japanese leadership's ability to protect their country from such attacks. Indeed, the raid caused Japan to recall a key aircraft carrier task force from the Indian Ocean to protect their homeland. Upon Doolittle's return, he was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Roosevelt and promoted 2 grades to Brigadier General. He went on to command the 12th Air Force in North Africa, 15th Air Force in the Mediterranean, and the 8th Air Force in England during the next 3 years. All 80 of Doolittle's raiders received the Distinguished Flying Cross, and those wounded, injured, or killed also received the Purple Heart. Additionally, they were awarded a decoration from the Chinese government. At the end of Doolittle's military career, he retired as a lieutenant general, but was not done yet with serving his country. Doolittle became an advisor to President Eisenhower, serving on Eisenhower's Technology Advisory Committee recommending the development of future aircraft. He went on to being named chairman of the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics. In 1985, he was awarded his 4th star by President Ronald Reagan. At an Air Force Association dinner, President Reagan made this statement.
You join me in a toast to a magnificent American, a man whose name will be remembered as long as the virtues of valor and patriotism last. Jimmy Doolittle.
Jimmy Doolittle passed away on September 27, 1993. He was 97 years old. He was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery. At his funeral, this was said about Doolittle. A leader has fallen. He led us in war and in peace, and he led us by example. He was an uncommon man with foresight, integrity, courage, and intelligence that is unmatched in the history of aviation.